The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selena Mackenzie.
Now, in her book, The Aviator and the Snowman, our final guest unveils the untold story of Amelia Earhart's decade-long marriage to George Palmer Putnam, offering an intimate exploration of their relationship and the pivotal role it played in her enduring legacy. I'm delighted to say she's joining us now. Welcome to the show, Laurie Gwen Shapiro.
Hola, I'm so excited to be here. I'm calling in from New York City, so this is a thrill.
Wow. Is it very early there for you?
Not too bad, but my book came out today, and I had a very good New York Times article. So I was up at 8 o'clock in the morning just to see what it was going to be.
Oh, congratulations! That's great.
Thank you.
News.
It's been a whirlwind week, but you're actually getting me on pub date, which is very exciting. So I'm doing a launch event tonight in New York, and then I'm off on tour.
Fantastic. Well done, you. It's nice to hear another side of her story. I mean, we know who she is and her legacy, etc. But this is something different. So how did they meet then?
Well, it's really funny because, when you tell people about reality shows, we think about television, right? But in many ways, Amelia Earhart was the first reality show. The person who is the showman in The Aviator and the Showman, George, was actually a publisher during the Jazz Age, and he was the publisher to The Adventurers, most famously to Charles Lindbergh. And he had a big hit book called We. That was Charles Lindbergh's expression of him talking about the spirit of St. Louis and himself, We. And it was one of the top books of the Jazz Age. So naturally, you want the next big thing. And any guy that's going to fly solo across the Atlantic is not going to get the headlines because Lindbergh has done that. So Putnam caught wind of some funding he could have for a woman across the Atlantic. It didn't really matter, to be honest, whether she was going to fly across the Atlantic or be a passenger, because 7 people had already tried and failed. Most of them had died, even as passengers. Some had been rescued. And one of them was a very beautiful aviator who was rescued and instantly became a silent movie star. So this was sort of an influencer error. We didn't have Instagram, but we had, stunt flying and stowing away, that kind of thing. And he was looking for someone to be this first passenger. So again, Amelia Earhart is cast as this all-American woman that's going to play the part. That said, she already knew how to fly back in 1920, but she was a social worker at this point in Boston. She was born in the Midwest. She had lived in New York and California and Chicago, all over, because of her family experiences with really an alcoholic father, but that's another part of the story. And so what happens is that she is cast as this all-American woman. And the flight is a very perilous flight. She could have died very easily. But when it lands in Wales in June of 1928, she's overnight a star. And there is even, the celebrations throughout Europe. But even when she comes back to New York, there's a giant ticker tape parade. But she didn't do the flying. And she feels very guilty about this. But this is how they met. When she goes to his office in Midtown Manhattan, I mean, to me, a lot of people think that the Amelia Earhart story starts in Kansas when she's in Atchison, where I'm actually headed to tomorrow for the Amelia Earhart Festival, which is every summer. 50,000 people tomorrow are coming. But the thing is that for me, as a native New Yorker, I could see, yes, there's obviously the Midwest part of the story, but this is a New York story in many ways. She is created in the lap of spin. George Putnam is what a lot of people called him the P.T. Barnum of publishing. But here's the thing. She actually is being love bombed by him. I mean, he's not the nicest guy in the world, which makes this story all the more interesting to me. She's pretty nice, by the way. I don't want to ruin Amelia Earhart for people. She's a very good, brave person. But George is married at this point to the Crayola crayon heiress. Her name is Dorothy Binney Putnam. And he just gets besotted. And he's not only is he trying to engineer her career as a manager and take 10%, but he wants to engineer a relationship with her. And at this point, she's actually engaged to a man named Sam Chapman in Boston. So this is how they meet. Later on, as many people may or may not know, a lot of people did not know that Amelia Earhart was married when I was writing this book, which this was certainly well known in the Jazz Age. Putnam was much more famous than Amelia. They do get married. The other marriage ends. Amelia marries George, and he's still her manager. But she is obsessed with flying over the Atlantic again without that baggage of having just been, a sack of potatoes. And so she's attempting to fly in 1932. And this is the Amelia Earhart that people in the 1930s knew. Again, the times shifted. It's no longer the Jazz Age. It's now the Great Depression in America and many parts of the world. We're feeling the effect of that. And she is sort of this great light. I mean, she's not always the greatest flyer. She's certainly not a bad flyer. You can't go across the Atlantic in a biplane and say you're a bad flyer, but she's not as great as Lindbergh. But Putnam times it to be 5 years from the day that Lindbergh leaves. And he wants to get that sort of echo of that historic event. She's supposed to go to Paris, and she lands in a cow field in Ireland, but that's good enough. She got another ticker tape parade. And her in 1932, I could safely say she was the most famous woman in the world.
So did it change his, you said he wasn't a terribly nice person, but did it change how he felt? Because obviously he had to pick the right woman. She was fiercely driven and impossibly brave, so she was the right woman for the job. But once he'd sort of fallen for her, was he then worried about her doing the flight? This is the love of his life, presumably.
Well, here's the thing. And I certainly do think Putnam loved Amelia. And I do think in many ways Amelia loved George Putnam. But this was an open marriage, which we get into in the book, which was actually not that uncommon in the Jazz Age. And he was someone who had been promoting risk takers. And, he was genuinely worried about her, but he was also profiting off of her risks. And what's so fascinating to me is, people talk about cities as characters, like New York is a character in this, Boston is a character, London is a character, but also decades. And you really have to know that the story for me gets really interesting when we shift into the 1930s. Putnam was a publishing person. He's coming from the family of a book company that's still around to this day, Putnam Books. There's no more Putnams in Putnam Books, but this was a family business back then. People mistakenly think that he was the head of the company, but his uncle, George Haven Putnam, there's a lot of Putnams in this book, was the head of it. And he wasn't so thrilled with the way that Putnam would take risks with the family name. And eventually he gets pushed out of the family firm. His wife is pushing him out of the marriage because, he's having a pretty much hard to conceal affair with Amelia Earhart at this point. And she has her own affairs. This is anything goes era. But I don't want to say that she wasn't partaking in that joyride as well. But at the same time, she's the one with the money. He even though he comes from a publishing family, he's more house rich, cash poor. And he tries to get back together with his wife. He's like, what? Because the Great Depression hits in October of 1929. And Amelia does not, her father loses money. She's scammed out of money. She had become a millionaire at the end of the Jazz Age. She does not have money now. And what they do have is each other. And that is where Amelia and George, and I think this is something that Amelia walked into openly, becomes a bit of the meal ticket for the couple. And it's not just by flying, the stunt flying would get you in the news, but then what she did would go all over, particularly the United States, sometimes Canada, and do lecture circuits and be on the road for hundreds of hours a year when she probably should be doing aviation skill training.
Yeah. Can I just ask, was it the decade before she disappeared that they were together?
Well, they meet in June of 28 and they get married in 31, which helps her do her most famous flight. There are other big flights of 1932. And of course, as anyone knows that knows anything about the Amelia Earhart story, she disappears in July of 1937, when she's doing a final flight, which is really a trip around the equator with Fred Noonan, who's her navigator. And so that is how long this relationship is. But, if you look at the Amelia Earhart story, there is a tradition in biographies of doing what they say cradle to grave. But for me, the juice of this story, the real story, is the second that Amelia goes in an elevator, goes up to the 18th floor in Midtown Manhattan, and meets the man who's going to change her destiny.
Yeah, indeed. And I know that he had children from his previous marriage, but she didn't have any children, did she? Or those together?
No, this is something that I don't think a lot of people know, that she was very much a stepmother, though. Her Dorothy Binney Putnam left the house in Rye, which Amelia moves into, and she had, people didn't stop using crayons in the Great Depression. She lost a little money, but still had a lot of money. She moves down to Florida, and Amelia is going to football games. There's two sons. And they both, I've have tapes of both of them talking on recordings. They loved her. Oh. She was very involved. She taught one of her stepsons to fly. She took another one to the World's Fair by plane. She was very much a mom. I think a stepmother is a mother, but she did not have biological children. She was thinking about it, but I think that she knew that she was taking a lot of risks and didn't want to bring children into the world. But she was very much involved with children. She had been a social worker in Boston working with children, and everywhere she went, she had a tremendous rapport with kids. And I think she might have wanted to be a mother, but like I know a lot of documentary makers that take tremendous risks and that are women, and sometimes they just don't want to do it because they don't want that responsibility on their shoulders.
Yeah, I understand that. It's a perfect example that the truth about her life is as it is often overshadowed by the legend, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that people should be able to hear the truth. I don't think this is a takedown of Amelia Earhart. I think this is a person who is flawed and brave and ambitious and pushing feminism forward and pushing aviation forward. But, we need to hear people in their full presentation. I think that doesn't do any service to any woman to be whitewashed. And, she, there's other biographies where she does nothing wrong. She's a perfect flyer. Or at the same time that George and his sort of no good ways sometimes, and he can be quite a bully with the other women pilots that he perceives as competition, where that gets mellowed out. And I think that people enjoy the truth. And I will say that I went into this book as a journalist. I'm a professor of journalism at New York University, and I also often write for the Times, and my book was excerpted in the New Yorker, which was rigorously fact-checked. And I think that this is I have receipts. This is a narrative nonfiction story. It feels like a story. It feels very cinematic. It's not a dry biography. But at the end of the book, I have all my notes, where you find these things. So you can't make it up for the sake of storytelling.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we're selling the book right now on our website, tre.radio. It's called The Aviator and the Showman, Amelia Earhart, George Putnam and the Marriage That Made an American Icon. It's by Laurie Gwen Shapiro, who we're chatting to now. And 15th of July today, as we said, congratulations, it's out today.
Thank you so much.
And I know you've written another book, The Stowaway. Do you have a website with all your information on?
I do. It is LaurieGwenShapiro.com. Laurie like Hugh Laurie. And Gwen like Gwen Stefani, and Shapiro Shapiro.
Like Helen.
Sorry for my phone in the background. You know, it is live radio, right?
No worries. That's what happens with live radio. It proves it's live. Listen, I wish you lots of luck. I hope today goes well and this evening and your tour and everything. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you. How lovely to have you for me. It's so nice to be on the show.
Thank you, Laurie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.